Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. Good coffee. Anyway, we're going to do something very special. I was talking about wood hinges in my last one. I'm going to make a wood hinge, a special kind of wood hinge that will take some time to make. So we're doing it in steps. In each video, I'm going to show it to you. Anyway, you have to watch the last one. But it got me to thinking about a hinge that I've also been using for many years. And what makes this hinge is it's kind of like the Swiss Army knife of hinges. I can make this hinge in under 5 minutes. I can make it scalable so it fits on anything from a very small, tiny box all the way up to a big door that you walk through, and use the same principle of this hinge. I can make it out of common materials that's here in the shop, a minimum number of tools. And what's really cool, I can take my tape measure, and my ruler, and throw them over on the bench, because I won't need those at all to do this job. It's foolproof. So let me show you the hinge. Let me show you the material it takes. Oh, and that's the last thing. The material to make this hinge, all I need is a nice little, this is just a bamboo skewer and a little piece of wood that's square. The shape of it is not important, other than it has to be at 90 degrees all the way around. I like them to be pretty much the same, but they don't have to be. If you're starting off making this joint, the closer to being square this is for you while you're doing it, the better off you are. So now you have your piece of wood that you're going to make your hinge from. And you've seen the hinge, what it looks like. We're going to cut this into 3 pieces. Then we're going to shape the end of it and drill a hole in it. And then we're going to put it all together with the pin in place on the 2 pieces to bring it together to make the hinge. And we can do this very quickly. So first thing you want to do is you have to establish what is the top of the hinge. The top of the hinge, and this is this surface up here on top. The bottom of the hinge is the part that's glued down to my project. So this, you have to decide which face is going to be your top, and you want to mark that top. Now I will tell you that one thing you want to know and think about is this is quarter sawn. You can see those, you can see the grain. It's running up and down right now. So I can put this pin through here. That'd be make that pin pretty strong going through this piece of wood without it splitting. If I turn this 90 degrees so those grains are running horizontal, now I put my pin in there. This would tend to easily split those grains apart, and it would split that wood. So pay attention to your grain. Decide where you're going to get your biggest strength of your pin going through it. And then you mark one side as the top. So I've marked this to be the top of the hinge, and that makes this the bottom of the hinge, and these are the 2 sides. Now we're ready to do the cutting. So then you take it, and you take your saw, and I cut it, whatever saw you want, and you do it with a handsaw, and I cut this to equal lengths. Now when I make this hinge, I cut my pieces to this length. This is 3 little pieces in here that are stacked up on top of each other, the horizontally on the grain, so that when I put my pin, I drill my hole in here and put my pin in, it's going across, just like we talked about a moment ago, it's going across those grains, so I get my best pin strength out of the end of this board. So once I cut them to length, when I did this hinge, then obviously these are 3 inches long to begin with, and I cut these off when I went to put them on here. But it's best to, I like to have them all the same size. It just makes it easier to do the shaping part. So once you get them all cut, all 3 of them, then we want to make, first thing we want, now we want to make the drill the pin hole. So to drill that pinhole, let me show you. I have a drawing here. This should help us to understand. If this is the end of the board, and I'm talking about the squared end here, you can see where it's square here. Eventually we'll round this over like this, which kind of is the profile of my finger, with the fingernail on the top, and this being the end of my finger, and this is the bottom of the finger. This is the bottom of the hinge, and this is the top of the hinge. So this is the way it will sit on your wood when it's sitting there to be the hinge. So the placement of this hole is kind of important, and again, you'll learn over time how to do it. Now, your first thought is going to be, well, just center it like here, make this symmetrical turn here, and put them all three together. Yes, that works. And you can do this. But I have learned over the years that the look of this, to have that circular area right here, always be in alignment as you're moving this hinge, they look like they're going out of alignment and stuff. Trying to get those all perfectly aligned through the whole motion, it's very difficult to do. So I don't even try to do it. I use this shape here of the finger, of the end of the finger instead, so that I still get the clearance, but it hides any imperfections between how these are all shaped. So you can do it this way or you can do it that way. I find this way works best. The placement of this hole, instead of being centered on the board, I find my center of the board with just a pencil. We've done it 100 times. Mark a line on one side, turn it around, mark it on the other side, and you can pretty much find center. Then you find where that center is. From this, you go in that half that distance also, and a 1/16 of an inch. Give yourself a little bit of fudge factor, because you're going to be grinding that away and shaping it. You want to start with a little extra and grind to where you want to be, than starting off too short. So go a little extra and drill that hole just like that, to where the bottom of the hole is closer to the top. I'm sorry, the hole is closer to the top, and the bottom of the hole is what's touching the center line on your board. So it's just off center a hair, and it's down in this way, just past that same distance that it is halfway here. That's the best place I find to put the hole. So once you establish where that hole goes, I use this little vise here that I have had for a while, and with this one I can put them in there nice and straight. It's very similar to a drill press vise. This holds my pieces perfectly straight with each other at this point. So now they're all in alignment. And I mark where I want that hole. Once I've established that and I mark my hole on here, now I'm going to drill it. I freehand drill it. I don't have to take it over the drill press. If you want to do that, you can do that. But you want that hole to be straight through all three. Being the fact that they're all stacked up nice and square to each other and clamped in place together, I can take my drill and do this freehand, because I'm sitting on a level surface. I have a bubble gauge here that I put on here, so I can hold this here, stand up, watch that bubble, and I can drill that hole perfectly plumb in there without any problem and have a perfect hole. I freehand drilled both of these hinges. I didn't do that at the drill press, and they work perfect. So you can do it this way. It's quicker, it's easier, and I feel more comfortable doing everything by hand and not having to use any of the equipment. Like I said, I don't measure it or anything. So once the hole is drilled, then you take them all and put them on a pin. Now I could use the bamboo skewer. I do have a finishing nail the same size. Sometimes I use this as the pin. Sometimes I use the bamboo skewer. It just depends. So this drill bit, though, is the size of this bamboo skewer, and I just happen to find a finishing nail that's also. Put them all together and clamp them up and put them in a clamp and hold them in alignment to each other on the one end, opposite of the hole. And I find that if I square them up to each other and I put a clamp on it right here, like so, make sure they're nice and aligned. I have the pin in here to hold this end in alignment. Now I can take this, I have another clamp in my little vise here, and I can put this in here, bring this over close to where the pins are, and clamp this one down tight. Now I can take my rasp and I can file this, because you want all three of these to be. I could also put this in my OTB vise and do this if I wanted to. So this is a couple different ways you can hold it. So I use my little jeweler vise and I use one of these clamped in there, and that kind of gives me my hold on this one here. And if I need to move it a little bit, it only takes me a second to move it so that I can change my angle so I can watch what I'm doing here. Once I had this sanded to where I want it, then you want to test it. So now we're going to test it and see exactly if it works or not. Once we know it works, then it's ready to install. It's that quick. So At this point, I lay them out onto a flat surface like this. And I take the pin, I take this off the pin, I take the center one, and I actually turn it upside down. And put this one back on right side up again. So when I set it down like this, I had this one top up, this one's top up, and this one's bottom up. That is so that when I flip this one over, now I have top up, top up, top off. Top is up on all of them that I established before I started making this. And I know where the top is, and I make sure they're up now. So that's why you want to know where that top is and mark it clearly so that you can do this. So now that this is ready, now we're going to put this on our boards to make a hinge door or whatever we're making. If this hinge here, we put the boards together flat to each other. So you put this hinge on here. You just take your two pieces of wood. I'm just going to use the back side so you can see it. And you put them to each other. And you put them on a flat surface so that they're nice and straight and right where they're supposed to be when everything is closed with the hinge on it. And clamp it down so that it doesn't move. Once you clamp down, you can take this. Now what I like to do is I replace this short pin with a real long one. So I'm just going to take a skewer that I have, whoops, and stick it through them. Whoa, come on. And now I have it kind of centered on that skewer. And there's my thing. So when I lay this down, top up on all three like this, and I lay it across my seam of these two pieces. And now to put the hinge on, all I do is I take my, out here as far as I can go on my skewer, make sure that right here at this point, that is exactly over on both ends. It's exactly over this seam. Now when I know that's lined up, I then take and I hold those two down with my two fingers. Get my crazy glue, put a little crazy glue right here, and I drop this down with this, making sure this is all nice and straight still. I can now put this down, hold it down, and then this one is now fastened in place. I then take this one, put a little glue, a little glue on the bottom here. And then before I set it down in place, I also make sure that I'm pushing it flat against this one that's already anchored. I make sure it's flat against there and push it as hard as I can against there. And then put that down and lock it down. Now you have two of the three in place. Your pin is still lined up like it's supposed to be, so everything is going good. And you take the third one and do the same thing. Push it up against here as you push it down on the glue to hold it in place. Once you have all three pieces in place and crazy glued down and your pin is straight, you're perfectly aligned and everything is good, you're good to go. So now I would take and pull this pin out and put the short pin back in there that you're going to use in there, and put that in there so that the pin is in it. At this point it's actually a working hinge, so you could actually pick it up and start moving it. But you probably don't want to do that quite yet. You want to anchor this down because that crazy glue doesn't hold very well and they'll pop loose very quick. And if you don't have this perfectly cleared, sanded enough yet so that it doesn't hit the other one, when you start to open it and hits that other one, it'll pop that right off. So don't be trying to open it yet. So at this point, take this first one and drill your hole in here and take your dowel, cut them to the proper length, glue them up with some glue, and then set it in the hole and tap it down with a hammer immediately, non-stop. You got to tap it in gently, but all the way in, because if you stop before it's all the way in, you won't be able to tap it in anymore. So keep it going as fast as you can till you get it all the way down in there. Do that with both of these and they're anchored. Then come back and do that with these, at least two of them. I would go ahead, if you can, put all four in there. Whatever you're going to anchor, you want to anchor it good at this point. And everything is lined up, everything is good. Then when you pick it up, you can try to open it and see if it hits. If it hits, take a look at where it's hitting Whether it's this one, whether it's this pin hitting over here, or whether it's these two pins hitting on the outside over here on the wood. So just look for where that is. If you have to, you can now take it and actually sand it off. That chances are, if you're having that problem, it's going to be on this top part of this, which is the nail part of your finger, right at the top here. It's this corner that's going to be hitting on the wood. So you'll have to take and shave that off a little bit. The more you shave off, the further it will travel, until you get it to a point where it'll actually travel a full 180 degrees. If you don't want it to travel full 180 degrees, you can stop sanding it so that when it reaches its natural point, you can have it stop and not go any further. So how much you sand off will determine how far this thing will actually travel. So keep that in mind. This is something you'll learn as you make them. So now you've made this one without any problem, and it's been anchored on. This is as solid as can be. No problem. So let's make the other one real quick, because we're really running out of time here. To do this one, it's 90 degrees to each other instead of flat. So put them on the edge of your bench, line your two pieces up like this, and start putting clamps on it. So the first thing I do is I put a couple clamps on it here. Let me put one here real quick while I'm here. Kind of hold this down. And I put a second one on here. Make sure my board is nice and aligned. And when I'm sure everything is perfectly aligned, then I take and do the same process. First thing I do is set this in here with a long pin in place. Make sure where I'm at here so I can line my pin up to my seam, just like I did on the flat one. Put the pieces down, anchor your center one first to this one. If you need to, pull the pin out, mark these, pull the pin out, cut these to the length that you want them to be at this point. Cut them this length. You want them long when you make everything. It makes it easier for them all to match. But once you're at this point, you're going to cut this off. So now you can cut that off. Anchor this one down real good with at least 2 dowels. Then you can come back with these little short pieces and flip them up. Put a little crazy glue on. Clamp it down here. And do that on both of them. Again, pushing them together to squeeze them together as you get it down. And while you got this all anchored right here, these are glued in place. Now you can take and you want to drill for these two here. To drill those out, you want to take one more clamp and clamp this piece down so that you're pushing from this board up into this pin that's going through here. So I put this right on the center one and on the bottom of this board, and I give it just enough pressure that this board is now kind of pushing this pin up against this one here up. And if everything is nice and straight, everything looks good with this down like this, now you can take and drill your 2 holes here. Drill them as deep and gently as you can. Don't do any strong pushing, but drill that hole as deep as you can into this piece here and drill it straight down. Then you can put these dowels in here while this clamp is still on there and gently tap them down in place. Once you're tapped in place and you're comfortable with where it is, cut it off, take your clamp and put it on here like this. When you get the second one glued in place, take another clamp and put it here and let this sit for a minute or two. Once it's all been together for a couple of minutes, now, and if everything is still perfectly lined up, you can pull the pin out, put your short pin in here, set it in place and crazy glue it in if you want. Take all your clamps off, and you have your second hinge. So now, you now have your 2 hinges. You can now make this hinge just as easily as you make this hinge. So, and now you have a complete hinge. It's solid and it'll stay, and it's every bit as strong with the dowels in there as any hinge can be. So everything lines up perfect, and if you had your pin lined up to begin with, it'll open and close perfectly. So there you go. That's how you put them both on. Now keep in mind, what makes this thing so versatile is that this is kind of small and has only one hinge. If you put 2 hinges on, if you follow this rule, put this hinge on first, go up there, make sure your pin is lined up when you put the second one on, and everything will be perfectly aligned without any problem. And now you know how to align when you install each hinge. Always use only 3 pieces to put your hinge. You could put more legs on here on the pin and lock them down. I have found that I don't need to do that. If I think I need more strength by having more of those, I just put a 3rd hinge on there or a 4th hinge on there, whatever I got to do, rather than sticking them all on there. You only want each of these hinges to have 3 points of contact for that pin, for each of those pins. And as long as you line each one up perfectly, everything will work. You can even create a piano hinge if you want by putting 3 on at a time and putting them in there. You can get a perfectly working piano hinge from this with just a little bit of care at the time of installation. So the other thing that's great about this is just imagine real quick that this thing is not these 2 little pieces of wood to make a lid for a box. Suppose this is a 4x8 sheet and 4x8 sheet of plywood. Give me a 2x4. I'll make this same hinge so that you can have a wood closet with the door that opens up this way, or a plywood box where the lid would open up this way out of full sheets of plywood with this same hinge design. You can scale it up and make it work just as easily and do it just as quickly. And chances are you could use it, pretty much make it with just about any material that you have on a construction site. You can make this hinge if you need to put something together real quick to have a hinged something. So it's a handy tool to have to learn to make. And again, this is more than just learning how to make one hinge. This hinge is versatile. You can make it as nice looking as you want. The design is the same. Or you can make it ugly and just put 3 pieces together with a pin just so you can have a functioning hinge. The sky's the limit. You can go up and down that scale. Also, you can make this as big as hinge or as small a hinge as you want. Just remain to that simple principle of only 3 points of contact on that pin on that hinge, and just make more as you need them, rather than making this pin with more legs in it. Make it by making it either bigger or adding more hinges, and this will work every time, and you'll be able to line it up every time and get a perfectly working hinge on there when you're done. So this should give you something to think about. Go out, you got to make this hinge. It's just like when you're making dovetail joints by hand. It takes practice. No matter how much you see it done on the video, when you sit down and start doing it, you got to do it yourself. Eventually, you'll get the feel for it. You'll know exactly by eye when you have this angle all set up, ready to go, and where you have your pin. You'll be able to do all that without using any kind of measurement easily. And you'll know when you put it together the first time, it'll actually work. I've done that many times that way. So it's so easy. It's worth the time to learn the skill to make this hinge. And once you start making this 3-piece hinge, I guarantee it, you'll never buy another store-bought hinge, because you'll always be able to make this quicker than you can run to the store and pick them up and come back. I'd be willing to bet on it. So give it some thought. Look around, see what materials you can use to make it. Cut some scrap pieces and make this real quick and see what you think. If you do, send pictures. There's my email address. Don't be afraid to send pictures. So, as you can see, thinking outside the box sometimes is really fun. And this is a skill that every woodmaker, every woodworker should be able to do, is to be able to make this 3-piece hinge. So, anyway, any questions, comments, observations? If you've already made hinges and you've got something I forgot here, leave it in the comments below. If you learned something here, hit that like button. It lets me know I'm doing the right thing. So, most importantly, please come back again, because I'm nowhere near done. Thanks, and we'll see you guys again soon.